Alright, now I'm going to show you guys the legendary creatures in this deck. Yes, I do have a good amount of legendary creatures. So I'll start off, Rise the Redeemed. He's just a really cheap legend, and he is a really excellent standalone card because he makes his own army and then he just duplicates it. So basically your opponents would have to deal with it really quickly, or he can get out of control. So he's just adds the threat density and he's just a good standalone card. Raphalos, I do run 12 forests, and then I do run Temple Garden. So he's really good for mana ramp, and he has 2 power for Revel Art goodness. Same thing with Rise. I do try to sometimes tutor for Raphalos if I need more mana, though usually I'll get Gaia's Cradle first. But I'm kind of on the edge about Raphalos, but I'm keeping him in the deck right now because he is pretty decent. Kataki War's Wage, 2 power. All artifacts have beginning or upkeep, sacrifice this artifact unless you pay 1. Kataki is really good against decks that rely extremely heavily on artifacts, especially on artifact mana, and that is not uncommon in EDH because people like to use Soul Ring and Signets and Coalition Relic and Darksteel Ingot, and Kataki is really good for turning off a lot of those artifacts so they have to continuously pay mana to keep them alive or just sack them. So he's really good for slowing them down, and he's really good against artifact heavy decks like Shroom, Arkham Dagsson, and Karn. Gadok Teague, another amazing card in this deck because he turns off a lot of bomb spells in EDH, and because I can tutor for him and he has 2 power to reanimate with Revel Arc, he can stay alive pretty decently. But he gives green-white the ability to preemptively shut down a lot of problematic cards like Time Stretch, because this deck really has no other disruption other than land destruction and things like that. So if someone gets the 10 mana resolves a Time Stretch, then you're pretty much screwed. And Gadok Teague pretty much throws a monkey wrench into things. So Gadok Teague is really amazing in this format. I want to be kind of careful with it though, because if people play with a lot of cards that get shut off by Gadok Teague, it could possibly bring a lot of hate to the table. But nevertheless, he is pretty much essential in this deck. Safi Eriksdottir, another amazing legend. Sack her when target creature is put into a graveyard this turn. Return it to play. That's really good for protecting your creatures from board sweepers. And it's good for reusing comes to play abilities. And it's got 2 power, so it can be reanimated with Revel Arc. And this is going to be part of the infinite combo with Karmic Guide, Revel Arc Mirror Entity, that I will show once I show the entire deck. Azusa, Lost But Seeking. I can play 2 additional lands on each of my turns, so it's really good for my mana ramp strategy. And it's pretty good with other cards in the deck. Mongra of Corndor. Tap him, remove Mongra of Corndor and target permanent from the game. Really excellent spot removal, especially because the permanent gets exiled. And I can abuse this with a couple other combos. Anyone who's played with Mongra would immediately know what I'm talking about, but I'll cover this later on when I get to kind of the tips and the tricks and combos. Glissa Sunseeker, 3/2 first striker for 4 mana is really good for green. Tap or destroy target artifact if its converted mana cost is equal to the amount of mana in your mana pool. So again, it's a really good card for just munching away at artifacts for people that love to rely a lot on artifacts to do stuff like mana ramp especially. So she's pretty good. Hakori, he has 2 power, so he can be reanimated with Revel Arc. Winter Warp effect, lands don't untap during their controller's untap steps, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps a land he or she controls. So this is really good for slowing down a game, especially if you have a superior board position and you slow everyone down to the point where you can beat down for the win. And it's really good with Gaia's Cradle, so you can just untap with Gaia's Cradle and have a huge amount of mana at your disposal each turn and stuff. Yosei, really good, another solid legend. Now we're getting more beatdownish legends. 5/5 flyer for 6. When he goes to the graveyard, target player skips their next untap step, and you tap up to 5 target permanents that player controls. So he's really good as like a deterrent, because someone kills them, then they get frozen for a couple turns by getting tapped down. And we can use him in some infinite combos to lock out someone from the game, and I will cover that. Crowbacks. Other white creatures get +1/+1. Non-white creatures get -1/-1, and he can protect himself. Crowbacks is really good in this format, especially against creatures that are like tokens that aren't white. And he's really good against all the X1s. They're utility creatures that people like to run that aren't white. And since he pumps your army, for the most part, like your Rise to Redeem tokens and things like that, he's pretty good there. And the paying 2 life is pretty much inconsequential in this format with 40 life, so he is pretty much impossible to kill. Absolutely amazing card. Kamal Fist of Kroza. Basically, he's for beatdown purposes, for his overrun effect, so I can turn a lot of my like wimpy utility creatures and tokens into huge threats by firing off an overrun, or I can even get 2 overruns off if I have 10 mana, which definitely is not out of the question with Gaea's Cradle and Rofellos. And they can animate lands, which is really good, especially against board sweepers. Like if someone wants to use a board sweeper, you can just respond by paying a bunch of green to turn a bunch of their lands into creatures, so their creatures die to the board sweeper. And he's also part of a really brutal combo that's one of my personal favorites in EDH, which I'll get to. Tolsmere Wolfblood, more global pump for my creatures, and he puts a 2/2 wolf creature token named Boja, but it's especially 4/4 because it gets pumped from Tolsmere Wolfblood. So it's just another solid legend. Myosian of Cleansing Fire, 8 mana, but he comes into play with a divinity counter, which makes him indestructible, and I can remove the divinity counter to destroy each other creature. So it's really good with Captain Sisay if I want to tutor for like a piece of board sweeper, and I need to kill creatures like right now. So that's really good for that. And then finally topping off the curve is Ray of Dawnbringer for 9 mana. Absolute game-breaking ability. At the beginning of your upkeep, return target creature card from your graveyard to play. That's basically like a late game threat for recursion, and if Ray of Dawnbringer sticks around for like a couple turns, the game's pretty much over.